It started with a flapping sound on a Sunday morning, not the usual chirping birds or the occasional lawn mower, but the brisk flutter of fabric catching the breeze. Our American flag, proudly displayed on a pole in front of our modest two-story home, danced against the morning sun. I was sipping coffee on the porch, watching our dog lazily patrol the yard, when I noticed the scowl, that signature HOA frown. Karen. Her real name, I think, was Margaret or something equally old-fashioned, but everyone just called her Karen. She was the head of the HOA, unofficially elected but permanently in charge, the self-declared guardian of property values, architectural uniformity, and approved mailbox designs. And today, her sights were set on our flag. She marched up the driveway, clipboard tucked under her arm like a badge of authority, sunglasses perched high on her nose. Her steps were quick and efficient, like someone who had never once doubted their own importance. She didn't greet me. Just a brisk nod, and then she was already halfway to the flagpole, standing beneath it like she expected it to salute her. This violates Section 7.3.2 of the Exterior Decor Standards, she said without turning to me. I leaned against the porch rail, coffee warm in my hand. Which part? She finally faced me, tapping her pen against the clipboard. Flagpoles are not permitted unless they are of the retractable garden type and located in the rear of the property, not visible from the street. Your flagpole is permanent and placed in the front yard. I took a sip, slow and steady. It's been there for 2 years. She huffed. Well, it wasn't approved. And frankly, it's a distraction. We're trying to maintain a cohesive aesthetic. My wife stepped out onto the porch just then. Dressed in workout gear, hair pulled back in a tight bun, she carried herself with the kind of composed intensity that could silence a room, or in this case, freeze Karen mid-huff. She glanced at me, then at Karen, and finally at the flag, which was catching the wind just right. Karen blinked. Mrs. Taylor, I was just informing your husband that your flagpole is out of compliance. My wife didn't respond immediately. She walked down the steps, crossed the lawn, and stood directly beneath the flag. Her gaze lingered on it for a moment, something unreadable in her expression, pride, perhaps, or memory. Then she turned to Karen. My grandfather fought in Korea, she said quietly. My father in Vietnam. I've served in Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. That flag stays where it is. Karen stiffened. I appreciate your service, but rules are rules. You're quoting rules, my wife said, that you selectively enforce. Karen's lips twitched. Excuse me. We've seen the Petersons' garden gnome collection. That's not in the regulations. Nor is the oversized flamingo at 418. But somehow, it's our flag that's a problem. Karen floundered for a moment, then regained her footing. We are working with those homeowners. And your case is different. It's a flagpole. Permanent fixtures must be reviewed. My wife stepped closer, calm but direct. Review it, then. Vote on it. But don't touch it. Karen adjusted her clipboard like a shield. If you don't remove it voluntarily, we'll issue a formal citation and begin fines next week. And then, with a final tight-lipped smile, she turned and marched back down the driveway. The sound of her heels clicking against the concrete felt like punctuation. I watched my wife for a moment. She was still staring at the flag, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You okay? I asked. She nodded. I just don't like bullies. Later that evening, I found her in the garage, pulling out an old storage bin. She opened it and began taking out medals, patches, and a series of folded uniforms. It had been a long time since I'd seen that part of her so visibly present, the soldier, the commander, the strategist. She wasn't showing off. It was more like she was remembering something important. They don't know who you are, I said. Doesn't matter, she replied. They don't need to. But they're not taking our flag. The next day, Karen returned with a measuring tape and an HOA pamphlet in hand, this time flanked by another board member, Carl, a quiet retiree who usually avoided conflict and only joined the HOA to get out of the house. He looked uncomfortable, clearly dragged into this. We're here to document the violation, Karen announced. You've had your warning. I hope you brought a step ladder, my wife said as she stepped out of the house. You're going to need one if you plan on touching that pole. Karen blinked. Excuse me. Because I'm letting you know now, she said, voice firm, anyone attempting to remove that flag without due process is trespassing. And I will respond accordingly. Karen's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? No, she said. It's a fact. I suggest you call the board and tell them to hold a formal hearing. Or better yet, call your lawyer. Karen scoffed and turned to Carl. Document it. Carl fumbled with his phone, took a few awkward photos, then muttered, maybe we should just bring this up at the next meeting. That evening, something unusual happened. People started showing up. Neighbors we hadn't talked to in months walked by, slowing down to glance at the flag. A couple of them nodded. One man gave a thumbs up. Someone even left a note on our porch, thank you for standing up. Apparently, word had gotten around fast. Karen's attempt to flex HOA power had backfired, spectacularly. And when someone eventually found out what my wife actually did for a living, that she was a senior officer commanding a NATO rapid response unit specializing in security and peacekeeping, things took on a new tone. The same people who once avoided HOA meetings were now asking when the next one was. Turns out, when the woman you try to intimidate has planned military logistics across continents and led joint operations under international mandates, a neighborhood dispute over a flag feels like amateur hour. Karen didn't come back the rest of the week. But we weren't done yet. Karen stormed up our driveway again, her clipboard in hand, mouth already pursed into that disapproving twist we'd come to know like the back of our hands. The flag, our flag, still fluttered from the front porch pole, a crisp American flag we'd raised every morning since we moved into the neighborhood. But that wasn't the issue, not really. This was Karen, after all. And Karen had made it her mission to enforce the HOA's most obscure and arbitrarily interpreted rules as if she were the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. My wife, Julia, had taken the week off. That's rare. Most people don't take leave from commanding NATO's elite rapid response unit unless absolutely necessary. But she'd promised me a few days of peace, some long overdue time together, maybe some grilling in the backyard. So when Karen appeared again, this time with a copy of the HOA rulebook and a pair of those absurdly large sunglasses, I was already watching from the window, drink in hand, bracing myself. Julia was trimming the hydrangeas. She heard Karen's footsteps before she saw her, military ears, always alert. I opened the front door quietly and leaned on the frame, just watching. Karen didn't start with a greeting. Of course not. Ma'am, she barked, gesturing toward the flag, I've informed you before that per HOA Regulation 14.3 subsection B, unauthorized external decorations must be pre-approved by the board. Julia turned slowly. It's a flag, she said, her voice calm, measured. Of the United States. Yes, well, Karen flipped her clipboard, we've had complaints. It's too large. It's aggressively visible. It creates a competitive atmosphere among residents who don't fly flags. It may pose a risk in high winds. Julia straightened, wiping her gloved hands on her cargo pants. A competitive atmosphere. Yes, Karen sniffed. And I noticed you've installed a solar-powered uplight. That wasn't approved either. Julia's eyes narrowed just a fraction. You mean the light that ensures the flag remains respectfully illuminated at night per U.S. flag code. Karen blinked. There's no such code. Julia tilted her head. Would you like me to quote it? I watched the tension tighten like a tripwire. Karen had no idea who she was talking to. She saw a woman in a t-shirt and gardening gloves. She didn't see the commander who had once coordinated a multinational evacuation under fire, or who'd calmly directed air support while under satellite blackout. Julia didn't puff herself up, she didn't need to. Still, there was something unmistakable in her bearing. And Karen, blind to it, plowed on. I'm afraid I'll have to issue a citation, Karen said, scribbling furiously on her pad. 3. Actually. For the flag's size, the light, and the tone you're using with me. I couldn't hold back a snort at that last part. Julia folded her arms. Karen, have you ever read the Federal Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005? Karen frowned. That's not relevant to HOA policy. It's a federal law, Julia said evenly. It prohibits HOAs from restricting the display of the American flag on residential property. Karen's lips thinned. Our rules don't override federal legislation, Julia finished for her. But you're welcome to escalate this. I'd be delighted to bring it to the board. And if needed, I can ask my legal department to assist. NATO does have a few lawyers on hand. That gave Karen pause. NATO. I command one of its special units, Julia said, as if it were a passing detail. We respond to threats anywhere within the alliance's sphere in under 12 hours. I coordinate air, land, and naval assets across 4 continents. But sure, let's argue about flagpole angles. Karen stared, lips moving as if trying to recalculate the situation. She glanced at me, perhaps hoping for support, but I raised my drink in a silent toast and said nothing. Then Julia smiled, the smile she used in negotiations, disarming but iron underneath. Karen, I respect your position. And I understand your commitment to the community. But if you continue to harass us over this flag, I will consider it targeted harassment. And I assure you, I document things far more meticulously than your clipboard ever could. Karen opened her mouth, closed it, then turned with military precision and marched back down the driveway. Julia went back to trimming the hydrangeas without another word. That should have been the end of it. But this was Karen. And Karen didn't let things go. The next day, I caught her taking photos from the sidewalk, trying to get the angle to make the flag look like it extended beyond our property line. Julia, who'd been inside reviewing classified logistics on her encrypted laptop, walked out slowly, stood next to her without a word, and simply watched. Karen flinched and walked off. A few hours later, we received a typed letter from the HOA board. Julia read it aloud, raising an eyebrow at the phrasing. It cited visual disruptions, unbalanced aesthetics, and interpersonal frictions due to noncompliance. Julia folded the letter, slipped it into a folder marked civil, and placed a printed copy of the Flag Act on top. She made a few calls, not the dramatic kind, no generals or diplomatic cables, just a brief legal check-in. She doesn't play at escalation, but she also doesn't bluff. By the end of the week, the HOA president, a meek guy named Dale who'd clearly been voluntold into his position, came by. He looked like a man walking into a den of lions with a plate of raw meat. Ah, Mrs. Raines, he stammered, we just want to say there's no issue with your flag. None. We're proud to have you and your husband in the neighborhood. Karen may have overstepped. Julia nodded, shook his hand, and offered him lemonade. Karen hasn't returned. At least, not to our door. But now we see more flags popping up around the neighborhood. A Marine Corps one, a Navy one, a couple of POW MIA ones. It's not about nationalism. It's about standing up. About knowing the difference between authority and tyranny, between rules and overreach. Julia still trims the hydrangeas every weekend. The flag still flies, lit respectfully at night. And somewhere, probably stewing behind her perfectly trimmed hedges, Karen is still fuming. She thought she could intimidate us with HOA bylaws. She didn't know she was dealing with NATO's Rapid Response Commander. And frankly, she never stood a chance.